we're going to build a lifting platform. Why would you want a lifting platform? You build a lifting platform for a couple reasons. Number one, it protects your weights and it protects the floor from any chipping, cracking, any damage that could happen due to, let's say, dropping cleans, snatches, setting down deadlifts, etc. You get the idea. The other reason you have a weightlifting platform is it's great for noise dampening, noise and vibration dampening. So let's say your neighbors don't hate you when you're lifting. You kind of get the picture there. Another good reason is it very clearly delineates the lifting space, so that if you're lifting with other people, when you're on the platform, they know they shouldn't be in that area. That's your spot to lift in. So it's great just for safety. So we're going to build a lifting platform. Build is probably a little bit aggressive, a little bit generous of a term. It's really just more assembling a platform, and it's not very difficult. So let's get to it. When you build a platform, a real reliable approach, a simple approach, is to make, and you can see this here, is you're going to make the first two layers, the bottom two layers, out of 23/32 OSB, oriented strand board. People will commonly refer to it as 3/4 inch OSB, but when you buy it at the store, it's usually going to say 23/32. So that's the thickness that you're going to use. Now, interestingly enough, this particular platform, and the one that you're going to see here in a little bit, is not actually made out of that thickness. We had some extra wood laying around and that's what we used, but you can also see, when we talk about it later in the video, that actually caused us a little bit of a problem, which was easily solved, but it did cause a little bit of a problem. So 23/32 OSB, a great option. Your top layer is going to be comprised of horse stall mats, 3/4 inch horse stall mats. You can get them at Tractor Supply, Farm and Fleet, feed stores in general. I would recommend you get the horse stall mats that don't have a texture on the top. You just want the nice smooth horse stall mat so that anywhere on the platform you encounter the exact same lack of a texture. And then the other part that comprises the top layer is you can either use some hardwood like a maple or an oak plywood, or you can use what we use, which is MDF. MDF's real nice, it's heavy, it lays down real flat. A note on MDF, it's going to come in a length of 8 foot and 1 inch. So if you buy this at like a Lowe's or a Home Depot, you can have them cut it down for you, down to 8 feet. It's also going to come at 49 inches wide. In other words, 4 feet, 1 inch wide. So you're going to want them to cut that down as well, and they'll do that. Now what we do, a lot of people will make the platforms so that the wood is 4 feet wide. And that's fine, you can absolutely do that. We actually like having them cut it down to 3.5 feet wide, 42 inches. And the reason we do that is it's much less likely that when you're setting down a deadlift, a row, snatches, cleans, jerks, whatever, it's much less likely that you're going to catch the edge of the wood here and chip it over time. Because when you cut it down to 42 inches instead of the normal 48 inches, you're getting an extra 3 inches of space on each side. So it's just a little bit nicer kind of for the longevity of your platform. To get started, you're going to take 2 sheets of OSB and lay them down side by side. They're going to be running front to back. Now, you'll note that these are not actually sheets of OSB. As I mentioned earlier, we had some other wood laying around. This is kind of some cheaper plywood, and that actually created a little bit of a problem, which you may have with OSB as well, and that is the problem of bowing or having a crown in the wood. If there's a crown, make sure that the crown is up. Another way of thinking of it is, if your wood has a bow, you want it to make a mountain, not a valley. That way, in the long run, the weight of the platform will take that bow out. Once you've got your first layer down, then you're going to bring in your next 2 sheets of OSB and you're going to lay them down perpendicular to the sheets in the first layer. Nate, one of our members, was kind enough to help me out with this, so that made it a little bit easier. Again, you want to make sure that the crown of those boards, if there's a warp, you want to make sure that the crown faces up. After you do that, you want to make sure everything's nice and lined up and flush so all your edges match up nicely before it's time to screw things down. Next up, you're going to grab your drill or your driver and you're going to start connecting the second layer to the first layer. So you're going to want to grab your box of 1 1/4 inch screws as well. And you want to drive the screws down far enough that the top of the screw is flush with the board itself, or flush with the sheet itself, because you're going to be adding another layer on top of this. I would not recommend using glue to attach the 2 platforms together. I've done that once. I will not do it again. If you glue the thing together, you will never disassemble it, and so if you have to move it, it's going to be a big pain. It's also worth noting that if you've got a 100-pound gym dog named Milo, he will tend to get in the way more often than not. I'm running 3 screws along the short edge of each board and then 4 screws along the long edge of each board. Once everything is screwed down, then you're going to get out your tape measure and you want to measure in 27 inches from each side. I'm doing that both on the front edge of the platform here as well as on the back edge of the platform, 27 inches in on each side. And that will allow us to bring in our 42-inch wide piece of MDF, and it'll line up with those marks. So just like you did with the boards or the sheets rather, for the first layer and the second layer, you want to make sure everything's nice and lined up. One of the nice features about MDF is that it's nice and heavy, so it sits very flat itself, and it's typically heavy enough that if you do have any warping of the sheets underneath, it'll usually take that warping right out. After that, time to get out your driver again. This is where we usually use 1 5/8 inch screws, although 1 1/4 inch screws will probably work just as well. And I'm putting 6 screws into each board, 4 in the corners and then 2 in the middle right there. And last but not least, we have the stall mats. On each side of the wooden section in the middle, you're going to have a piece of stall mat that's 6 feet long. That's the section that I'm grabbing and dragging right here. And then in front of that, you're going to have a section that's 2 feet long. The width of those is going to be 2 feet 3 inches or 27 inches. Remember, the middle section is only 42 inches. It's only 3.5 feet. So because of that, the rubber on the outside is going to have to be 2 foot 3 inches. Now you'll see I'm putting in that back section, I'm going to put in 4 screws. The 2 corners right there, one about midway up, and then another one, it's tough to see from here, but right at the edge. And then the front piece of rubber right there is getting 3 just at the corners. One in the first corner, there's the outer corner, and there's the other corner that lines up with the other rubber mat. What you will note is I'm not running any screws along the actual wooden section. That way we reduce any chance of dropping any weights or hitting a screw that might not have been put in as deeply as it should have been. Next up, we're going to talk about how to cut these rubber mats. It is often suggested that you should use a utility knife or a carpet knife, and that'll work. But it turns out there is a far easier method.
Okay, so we're going to cut the rubber here, and you can certainly use a carpet knife for this, but we have a whole bunch of platforms in our gym, something like 18 of them, and when we first moved, the thought of using a carpet knife or a utility knife on every single one of those platforms was daunting and depressing. So we figured out a better way. This way is a lot better. What we have here, it's a little bit tough to see. We've got 4 pallets here. You just need to create some type of raised cutting surface because we're going to use a jigsaw. That will allow the rubber mat to be cut without the blade hammering into the ground below. So we've just got a couple pallets here. You want to support both sides of the rubber so it doesn't vibrate, because the blade will just stop going anywhere. Your progress will be much slower. But you just want a little bit of a gap. So I've probably got something like a 4-inch gap in between the 2 pallets that we can cut down here. So we're just going to measure 2 feet 3 inches, 27 inches in from each side. We'll snap a chalk line, and then it's super fast. It's awesome.
And here we go. Again, I'm just going to measure in 27 inches right there. Barb's going to do the same thing from her end. Then we're going to get out the chalk line, snap it, and again, you've got to make sure that where that chalk line is going to be snapped is lined up over that gap, because again, you don't want your blade hammering into the ground there. Once you get going, it's going to go very smoothly and very quickly, so make sure you keep your limbs out of the way. You also may want to keep your dog out of the way. I should probably have some safety glasses and some ear protection, but I didn't have those handy.
1 minute and 2 seconds.
1 minute and 2 seconds. That's with dog interruptions. Also, you may have noted the end slowed down quite a bit there, and that's because one pallet was a little bit shorter, and so at the end, one side of the rubber wasn't as well supported, so it just started vibrating a lot, and then it just slows way down. So this is the way to do it, let me tell you. We're talking about platforms, not the weights. We're talking about platforms.